Grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, the founder of the Empowered Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated profound loss and found the strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, reclaim your identity, honor your grief journey, and create a future grounded in resilience and purpose. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth, one story at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to let you guys know you can invite yourselves over to empowergriefjourney.com where you can explore past episodes of the podcast, grab your copy of the Empowered Grief Journey anthology, and book a free grief clarity call to discover your own empowered grief journey. Today, I have a wonderful guest with us. Her name is Suzanne. She's a grieving mom who found meaning in her loss by providing grief education, sharing how grief really works and how we can better support those experiencing it. She draws from everything she has lived and learned since her son died to demystify grief for both grievers and those supporting them through group and one-on-one coaching, workshops, writing, and speaking. She is passionate about breaking the silence around grief so we can build connection instead of isolation in times of loss. Suzanne believes that grief holds the potential for transformation and chooses to embrace that possibility with intention. Through her conscious and curious grief method, she guides grievers to chart their own path forward. Her TEDx talk, Grief is Hard, Let's Do Better, is helping shift how we understand and respond to grief. She's a certified grief educator and transformational coach. And so, without further ado, Suzanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm like, oh, that sounds like me. I love your intro. As I was listening to your intro again, which I've heard because I've listened to the podcast, but I was like, oh, I use that word. I use that word. Like so much of how we speak about grief and that grief journey is so aligned. So I'm so excited for this conversation.
I love that. I'm really looking forward to it with you. And I also am really excited that you and I are both presenting at the Global Grief Conference this weekend. What day are you presenting?
I'm on Saturday at 2:45 Pacific.
Oh, okay. I'm on Sunday at 9:30, I believe. So
There you go.
I'll have to tune into your slides.
Yes, ditto.
Awesome. Well, as we get started, since you've listened to the podcast, you know I typically like to ask my guests to share a little bit more about themselves and share with us a little bit of your grief journey to get us started.
Yeah. I mean, I have come to realize because now I just, like you do, I live in this world of grief. It's what I do, it's what I research, it's what I read about, it's what I help people with. I had a very wise friend of mine point out that as an adoptee, I've actually been grieving since I was born. And that was such an interesting way for her to look at it. She's like, well, you lost your mom immediately. Of course, you've been grieving your whole life. And I was like, what? How is that a thing? But it really opened my eyes to, oh, I actually think that's kind of true. The loss for me, though, that really is what propelled me down this path of becoming a grief educator, TEDx speaker, author, all the things, is the death of my son, Ben, which you mentioned. He died in September of 2020. He was 22. And that loss, really blew up my world as you might expect it would. I think I really argue all the time that this hierarchy that we label griefs with, where some are more worthy of grieving than others, is unhelpful. And I will say at the same time, the grief and the experience of losing my dad when I was in my early 30s or my mom when I was in my mid 40s in no way prepared me for the grief of the death of Ben. And, what that taught me really fast is that even though I had had these significant losses, I mean, all of my grandparents, aunts and uncles, my own parents, I did not know enough about grief to do it in a way that felt healthy to me. And I think that's partly because, the story of a bereaved parent is of one where they are never the same. They kind of curl up in the corner. They often die shortly after. It's all doom and gloom. It's all bad. And I knew that. Sorry, my dog just grabbed the cord to my phone and pulled it down on himself. One moment, please. I knew that that version of a grieving parent's story was not going to be my story. I was very clear that was not how this was going to go for me. Which is fine, except if it's not that, then what really became kind of my curiosity was, okay, but if I'm not going to do that, what am I going to do instead in this time in that early and acute grief where nothing makes sense? The way the world operates doesn't make sense anymore. Who I was no longer existed. I was very clear. There is a curtain between before that and after that. And the person I was before doesn't exist anymore. So, what was I going to do next while feeling like flotsam and jetsam being tossed around in this ocean of big emotions and fear and despair and pain? And knowing that I wanted all of that to be okay. Because I knew that if I tried to deny any of it, we're so conditioned, especially in the Western world, for our emotions to be very controlled or only the positive ones, right? The negative ones, and that's a whole paradigm that's problematic in my worldview. Those negative ones, those bad ones, it's such weird language. We don't want to see them. They're not supposed to be public. We're not supposed to talk about them. I'm like, that's baloney. And I will not survive if I try and do it that way. Right. My A plus, fix it, numb it, like all of that. Like that was not going to work. And I was already really on a transformational journey. I had already done a lot of work in a wonderful container and done lots of training. That's what my coaching training is transformational coaching, women-centered coaching. So I was already kind of on that path. And I knew very early, even in the despair and the pain and the horror, that this loss was going to be one of the biggest catalysts for transformation I would ever be offered.
That's a
Yeah, go
very
ahead.
powerful statement. I just want to share that because a lot of people don't go through a loss, particularly the way you did, losing Ben, and have that outlook that this grief is going to be transformational for me. A lot of us are very scared. It's a very hard place I talk about where when grief hits and we lose somebody or we lose a job, relationship, whatever it may be, that old identity fractures off all of a sudden. The new one's
Yeah.
over here waiting for you, but in the middle of that thing is grief. And that's a big, messy, ugly process that does not follow a five-step program. I hate to tell you guys that. It kind of goes by one, five, four, two, three. It jumps around, it moves around. It's very messy. And it's only through
Hmm.
that navigation process, though, that we do get to this new person of ourselves. And when we go through grief, we find ways to accept our loss. We find ways to process our emotions and understand it. We start learning what safe people are and unsafe people, and people that want to
Hmm.
hold space for us and walk beside us. And then we have those of people that want to try to fix us.
Yeah, they were not welcome in my world. Like if you came in trying to fix it, I was like, well, there's nothing for you to fix because I'm not actually broken. And I think it's so important for grievers to understand there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that needs fixing. You're actually having a very healthy human response to a loss. This is what is supposed to happen if we allow ourselves to kind of, supposed to on each other, which I try and avoid. But, some kind of version of grief is the natural human response. We've just been conditioned to kind of numb or ignore or box up or keep very quiet and private what that looks like. And I saw very quickly that that actually was really unhealthy for all of us because the griever needs to be witnessed. Grief is different every time for every one of us. So there's, 8 bajillion ways to grieve because if each of us are going to do it differently each time, it's, I don't know, goes on to infinity. The one universal is that grief needs witnessing. So if you can't find, as you were talking about, Chris, those safe places, those safe people, even though they're often few and far between, we really are in a pickle. We're in trouble because we need to be able to talk about it. We need to be able to express it. And whether you're a talker or you want to go smash things or you want to go, scream in the forest, whatever it is, we need to have a way to express our grief and to be able to be witnessed in it. And the support people all desperately want to help and they don't know how either. So we have this weird disconnect where I need support, you want to give support, you don't know how to show up or to offer or to say something that doesn't feel icky and gross. And I don't have the bandwidth to teach you.
Yep. That's what I think is hard about grief in many ways. I was just talking
Yeah.
to somebody this last week about the phrase, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss," and I was talking about with this individual because I had somebody say it to me in the last week, and I saw the
Hmm.
difference though. It came from an emotional, I just don't know what to say, and I felt that there's people that use that phrase and it's very empty. It's very like, okay, I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about this. Let's move it on in the corner. That's the grief education piece coming together right there is what I just shared is that, it's fine if you say that, but follow it up with something. You can ask a question. You can even tell somebody very openly, I don't know what to say, and I'm not sure what I can say to you. And that opens it up to the griever, by the way, to sit there and say, hey, this is what I need. This is what I could tell you right now. And
Yeah.
your ability to hold space for them in that moment is exactly the grief education that can help us better witness grievers, as you alluded to.
Yeah. And I love that sense of I'm so sorry being like the opening phrase. That's not supposed to be all you ever say about the person's loss, right? It's a great opening phrase because we are sorry. We do feel that empathy, that compassion. But if that's all you say, there's nowhere for us to go, right? We have to be in this sort of shared agreement that we're going to be uncomfortable together because the griever is not comfortable either. So it's okay. Grief is very uncomfortable when we've grown up in a grief illiterate culture that has so much lack of knowledge, lack of skills, phobia, all the things that make us not have a robust, grief knowledge for ourselves. And for the supporter, you know, I often say if you're not someone who can sit with the big messy emotions, if you don't want to be that person that they talk to, be the practical helper. But anything you need, let me know is not a practical offer because I, as a griever, can't do anything with that. If I don't know something right in this moment that I need that I could ask you to do, I will never reach back out. And I had people get mad at me because they were like, you're going to need help. Like, why aren't you accepting help from people? And I said to one very caring, much loved relative, I said, you know what? I promise that's not what I'm doing. If you happen to call at a moment where I know something I need, I will absolutely, joyfully, gratefully let you do it. But I don't have the ability to remember who said they wanted to help, to think about what they're good at, where they live, what they could do for me in the moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, we're out of peanut butter. Like I have no bandwidth to rifle through my Rolodex of people who've offered help, figure out who it might be, who should, like, the griever can't do that. So if you're that practical support person, we need very specific offers, right? Go stand. I'm going to the grocery store today. Go stand in front of your fridge or your pantry. Tell me what's missing. I'll bring it this afternoon.
Well,
Okay.
that's
Walk me through the steps. Help me get you the list. I had someone do my grocery shopping for about a year and a half because I could
that's
not manage the
amazing.
grocery store. I just couldn't manage it. And bless her, she was astonishing. I could give her a list. I'll never forget one day reaching out to her and being like, you know what? There's no junk food in the house. And I really just need junk food. Can you just bring junk food? And she brought this beautiful assortment of junk food that was perfect, right? That kind of practical support, we need that too. And when it's so interesting when you said, it's okay to say, I don't even know what to say. When I think about my close supporters, there's about 4 women who stepped up in ways that are still astonishing to me 5.5 years later. Almost every single one of them started with something like that. I have no idea what to say, but I'm here with you. I care deeply, and like I will walk alongside you while we figure it out. Something like that.
Yeah.
And that opened up the space for me to be able to say, great, I don't know either. But like if we can talk it through, we might be able to figure it out.
Well, that's where I try to let people know, in those moments too, it's okay to follow up with the fact to say, I'm not sure how best to help you. What support do you need
Yeah.
now? Or how can I support you right now? And turn that thing over. And something you highlighted really well, it brought back some memories for me, but in the throes of grief, grievers, it literally is like something working like this, and then it just cuts out here, then it picks up again later. Our brains are just very just black and white and grayed out in many ways as we go through grief. And so when you're talking really fresh to a griever, sometimes they'll hear part of what you say and the other half just doesn't get there. And that's very
Yep.
normal, by the way. I try to tell people I coach that. Say, hey, you're not crazy. You don't have mental problems. You don't have memory problems. Your brain right now is trying to categorize and organize what happened and trying to figure out how to keep you safe as you move forward. So right now, all those little things that in everyday life we could pay attention to and used to pay attention to just can't
Hmm.
process right now. So we have to kind of give ourselves a break and give ourselves some grace to the things are going to take a little longer initially. Something that might take
Yeah.
you 10 minutes is going to take you half an hour. And it's not because there's a problem with you, it's just your brain needs extra time to work through that.
Yeah. I tell the story in my TEDx talk about my daughter and I deciding one day we should be able to feed ourselves. And, really the should have been the first clue that we were on the wrong track. But we decided we would make grilled cheese sandwiches. It took us 45 minutes to make grilled cheese sandwiches because that sense of like you have to do multiple steps and they have to actually be in the right order for you to get the result you want. Like you can't put the cheese and the mayonnaise and the bread in not the right order. Like they have to, the structure has to be a certain way, right? It's actually a lot of steps if you think about it. I know people are like, what? How did that happen? But it took us 45 minutes. Like that's a muscle memory. Shouldn't even have to think about it. To throw together a grilled cheese sandwich, that's a nothing ask. But for our grieving brains, it was a step too far. And it took us that amount of time to be able to break down the steps, to talk ourselves through them, to find the things we needed. Like all of that automaticity is gone. And it does slowly come back over time. Our brains have, complete some of their reprogramming, as you say, and those kind of systems come back online, but they're not there for the research that I've been reading says that it's up to 5 years. Like it's a
Wow,
long
that's a long
time that
time.
your brain is reprogramming itself. And it doesn't stay in that, nothing works at all part for the whole 5 years. But it's a years long process for all of those, pathways that are connected to your person or your job or your relationship for those to all get rerouted. Because that's literally what's happening in your brain. Those pathways are having to reroute around the information that that thing is no longer there. So on a physical level and a neurological level, it makes a lot of sense. On a practical level, holy cow, that's the one thing really that brain fog that I didn't talk to anybody about. I was
Mm.
asking my daughter about it the other day because we talked about everything between us, and I did accept that because I was so scared that there was actually something wrong with me that I didn't want to say anything to her because her brother just died. And if her mother now has some kind of instant onset, something's wrong with her brain, I was not going to burden her with that. And I kept that to myself because it was so scary. And it's
So
totally normal.
So something I want to ask you about with grief, because you sound very aware in this area of things. What do you think has contributed to our society being very ill-equipped to talk about grief, hold space for grief for people? I was watching a show called Downton Abbey the other night just because
Mm-hmm.
everybody kept talking about it. I was like, all right, I'll watch this. And I kept watching how
So
they
good.
would make like the littlest mistakes of things, like didn't bring somebody
Mm-hmm.
their eggs quick enough, or like their jacket wasn't perfect or something. And I saw how like demeaning they were on top of people about those little mistakes. It was just this very like you screwed up and didn't do this right thing, and I was going, it's not a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
but what do you think? Looking at society, just using that example and where we are today, what do you think's contributed to our illiteracy with grief?
So I believe at this point there are a number of factors. I think part of it is that our limited labeling of what grief is was it's much better now. Even in the 5 years that I've been in this space, it's much better now. But it really was only about the death of somebody. And if you're in a culture where death is like the top or two or three most feared things, the thing that comes with it is also going to be feared.
Mm.
So I think that's a piece of it that we've tied it to our understanding and our fear of death. So we fear all things associated with death. Grief is tightly associated with death. We fear grief. The other piece, I think, is that in our kind of individualistic, you should be able to power through and do the thing and blah, blah, blah. We've really created a culture where the gifts of emotions are sadly neglected, right? And we even have that sense that there's like good emotions and bad emotions, or positive emotions and negative emotions. And I understand that on a frequency level, there are some that are a higher frequency than others. That doesn't make any of them good or bad, right? They're all valuable. They all have something to teach us. They all are. an important part of our human experience. When you're in grief, they are big and they are loud and they are messy and they're tangled. And if you are trying to be that in a culture that wants everything to look good from the outside and wants emotions to be quiet and pleasant, there's not a lot of space for you. And so that creates a situation where I'm not talking about what's true for me because the messages I'm receiving are that it's not acceptable. So then I'm doing it quietly and privately, much to my own, detriment and everybody's collective detriment, but that's how we're set up right now. And what that means is no one is learning from me because I'm not sharing my stories, which is what's so beautiful about a
Mm.
podcast like this. Humans learn from story. That's how we're wired. We learn from stories. We learn from each other's stories. We learn from you sharing your experience with me running that through my, personal funnel system, filter system and going, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or I don't really get that. Or, oh, totally. Right. We all have those moments where we're like, yes, exactly that. And we have those moments where we're like, what are you talking about? We don't have any of those moments around grief because we don't talk about it. And that keeps us all ignorant.
I love everything that you said comprehensively about why we're so illiterate to grief. And I love your description that we tie grief and associate it with death. And,
Yeah.
I find death kind of funny nowadays because I'm not scared of it anymore. I don't fear it. I know it's something I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
face at some point in my life. And, I say that because I was watching a Gary Vee clip a long time ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and some girl ran up to his SUV and said, Gary, what's your one thing of advice you tell somebody my age right now? And he goes, one day you're gonna die. And the shock in her face, just like, I mean, it looked
Yeah.
like Casper's ghost. I mean, she was just like, what, why would you say it? And he goes, you're gonna die one day. What do you want to do with
Hmm.
this life? What do you want to create? What did you want to build? And so, I think part of that journey though, outside the entrepreneur world, is that we go through grief, we go through loss. We're gonna lose parents, we're gonna lose children, we're gonna lose pets, we're gonna lose jobs, relationships, everything. And we don't ever get prepared for it because, like what you said, we don't share stories about it. We're told not to talk about it. And we're just delaying the inevitable. We're avoiding the inevitable. We're also not giving ourselves a chance to understand our emotions and how we feel. And I've come to learn on my journey, and I laugh when I do ask people who don't believe this, but I say, what's your emotion telling you right now? What's it trying to communicate? If you're anxious
Hmm.
right now, if you're panicky, if you're feeling off, there's an emotion sitting right here that you're pushing down on. Take your finger off, let that thing fly because it's trying to
Yeah.
communicate something to you. And I think if we taught more people, by the way, to read their emotions, understand their emotions, listen to them, their messages. They're not your anger, by the way, for example, in grief. Anger's not a bad thing. I tell everybody that anger's not
No.
bad. It's trying to tell you a very forceful message about love or missing something that you need to hear. And so I just feel like if we were to, educate people like we are on today's podcast about these aspects of grief, how to pay attention to them, not fear them, but learn how to use them, I think we could really change the world's perspective in many ways around grief and life in general.
Yes. 100% yes. And what's interesting about emotions is, if that feels like a bridge too far, that you're going to be able to, first of all, uncork them and then listen to them for some deep message and then make change based on that message. Like, if you're at a place where that feels like impossible, a really great starting point is to just learn how to name them.
Mhm.
Because one of the things that happens as a result of us being in this kind of, emotionally numbed existence is that we don't even have robust language. Lots of us are at the, I was doing a workshop the other day and I was doing an exercise about, naming the emotions and really leaning into them. And I said, we don't want primary school language. If you're still calling your emotions, mad, sad, glad, they're not doing anything for you. We have to get to those, grade 12 words where, if we feel despair or we feel devastation, we feel abandoned, we feel dismayed, we feel gratitude, we feel, there's all these really juicy words. We feel abundance, we feel resilience, right? If we can get to that kind of naming, just the name will keep the emotion moving. So even if you can just start there, where you move past, shove, shove, shove to, okay, well, what might one be called? then you're taking that little step. Grief is a journey of a million baby steps. We're not striding anywhere with confidence. We're like cautiously stepping, one tiny step forward. And a really great step with our emotions to get in touch with them is to just try and figure out what their name is.
Yeah, I mean, on my own personal journey, I was very angry after I lost my son. I was never been
Hmm.
that mad in my life, and I kept saying, all these things like I was pissed off and angry and rage and all these things. And I remember one night I was trying to make a box for his ashes, and I got ticked off with the wood beyond comprehension .2 a second, and I smashed my foot on it and did something. I don't remember what it was. I was in a boot for 6 weeks, but long story short, I broke down and cried in that moment. First time I did after that
Hmm.
one, and what came out was not anger. What was behind that was
Yeah.
hurt and sadness and disbelief and shock. And those things of why am I here? Why did this have to happen? Why me? And so that's why I always say, like you brought back to your thing, when we're using fifth grade language for our emotions, there's
Yeah.
way more underneath there we're not allowing ourselves to get to. And so sometimes it does take busting your foot like me. I'm just going to put it out there. Sometimes
Yeah.
it takes that. But when you are in that place, sit with that. All those other verbiages, descriptions are going to come out. And that's actually, by the way, going to release a lot of that energy inside you, all that stuff you feel pushed down. And, I always say emotions are like a Chinese ping pong tournament. I mean, they're literally ping ponging around in you like this. They're hot, they're
Hmm.
fast, they're moving. And when you don't let them out, they start causing problems inside you and health and feelings and anxiety and panic. All of those things can be attributed to just simply not giving your emotions space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing with anger is I actually think anger is almost mislabeled as an emotion. And I get that it is one that we feel angry, but it's usually a mask or an umbrella over something else. Because in a weird way, anger is acceptable. In our sort of Pollyanna positive emotions world, it's okay to be angry. Is it okay to feel despair or hopeless or ripped off or, disappointed or dismayed? Mm, not as much. But man, I'm angry. We're righteously angry, right? Like anger has a weird place in our emotional conversations with each other, which I find so interesting. So it's become the one that we're allowed to say out loud, but it really is kind of an umbrella or a mask on top of what's really going on. So yeah, I'm sorry that it took you breaking your foot, but had you just stayed mad, all of this post-traumatic growth that has happened would not have started to happen. But when we can get down to, oh yeah, I feel like this was unfair and why did this happen to me? And I'm confused and I'm uncomfortable and I don't know what to do next and I don't understand how the world works. That's where we can start to then take those baby steps. Because if we're just stomping our foot having a temper tantrum, we're not moving.
So, Suzanne, let me ask you this question too. A lot of people that go through grief, most of us do, we're going to end up in a new beginning place of life. Whether we want to or
Mhm.
not, whether we like to or
Yep.
not, whether we agree to it or not, it's going to happen. What would you share to people who are early on in their grief or, maybe 4 years out like I am? What advice would you give a griever about new beginnings and what that really looks like and means? Because I think some people misconstrue it as moving on and getting over it and letting go, which just doesn't happen. But what does a new
Yeah.
beginning mean to you?
Oh, that's such a juicy question. And I'm 100% with you. It has nothing to do with moving on, letting go, getting over it. All of that language is wildly problematic. For me, the end game with grief is to get to integration. And that's that concept of, I love the way David Kessler explains it. He says it's when you think of your loved one or the thing you've lost, if it's not a loved one, and the response to that thinking and that memory is more love than pain. For
Mm,
me, that's where I'm trying to get to. That's always the end game, right? That's the goal. I, not for a split second, wanted a life where Ben was not part of it. I know he's not still here. And I know many things that I dreamed for him and for me with him aren't going to happen. And he is still a part of my life. The things I learned from him, the things he still teaches me, even though he's not here, the growth I've had because of him and ultimately because of his death, all of that means that I get to bring him with me. So when I think of new beginnings, It's about the culmination of those baby steps. That's what takes you to that new place, right? It's the little decisions, it's the movement, it's the moments of just sitting with it. I really realized that my path forward was to get really good at being okay in the sort of Buddhist sense of okayness with the horror and the despair and the confusion and the gratitude and all the things that come when you can start to feel some of those lighter emotions again. I had to be okay with all of it because any part of pushing it away or ignoring it was ultimately going to be unhealthy in the way that you're talking about our, desire to kind of not process or allow our emotions to keep pinging around. So for me, that new beginning is a process. It's not a destination or a moment where you're like, oh, here's my new beginning, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that kind of, there's no party, there's no streamers, right? It's that sense of, yeah, you know what? He is not physically here. I am still carrying him with me. And I am building this rich, full life that I would have had if he was here. It's a different one, but it's rich and it's full and it's nuanced and it's exciting. And I have ended up completely different places than I would have had he lived. And that is not to say for anyone who hears that and thinks, oh, well, like it's like you're dismissing that he died. No, 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 no. I will always be devastated that he died. That's just a part of how I will always feel. And I can be devastated that he died and grateful for the opportunities that have been presented to me because I ended up on this path of being a grief educator and coach. I can be so disappointed that he's not here for this big family thing and appreciate that we still have big, fun family things. And that's an opportunity for us to talk about him and welcome him to the space and have a ritual about him. Or be like, oh my God, he would think this is so ridiculous, right? So to me, that new beginning is the journey. And it starts very early, whether you want it or not, or you're doing it with intention or by accident, doesn't really matter. You are not going to be the same person again. And that's okay. We're actually supposed to reinvent ourselves multiple times in a lifetime. So this is a really an opportunity to acknowledge and see, I felt for a long, long time, like probably the first 2 years, that I was really just living in this post-apocalyptic nightmare. Like I could just see the world blown up all around me. That's what I saw from the inside. And beautiful things still happened, and flowers still bloomed, and birds still chirped, and people still gathered, and people still supported each other. And it's the both and of it, right? That brings you to that place where you look back and think, oh, wow, like I really have come a long way. And I'm really proud of it in the most healthy kind of way.
That's really beautifully said. I couldn't really add much more to it other than I love your analogy that it is a journey, not a destination, and it's a
Yeah.
million steps to get there. I think that's a very accurate description. And for you guys listening, I'm a big fan of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. I read it many years
Hmm.
ago, but something that he says in that book works really well for grief, by the way. Everybody always shoots for 100% growth, 50% growth, these monstrous strides, and I got to get there fast. What he talks about is 1% a day, 1%.
Yep.
And for some of you, that's going to be going to the grocery store. And that one was really
Hmm.
hard for me after I lost my kid, but that's your 1% for the day. That's it. Nothing else on top of it, just that one
Yep.
activity. If we focus on 1% a day, by the way, we're 37% better at the end of the year. That's the funny part about it. So this is to say, like Suzanne shared with us today, that it's a million steps to get there. And it's okay to focus on the 1%, not the 100%. Focus on the one, because that compounds over time. And that's where our shift in new beginnings becomes less of the pain, less of the hurt, more of the love, the empathy, the compassion, the kindness, and giving ourselves grace as we figure out what the new part of our life is going to look like. Suzanne,
Hmm.
this has been a beautiful podcast, and I wanted to wrap things up with you by having you share with listeners if you have a book of any kind or website or social media where they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing about having my name is I appear to be the only one. So my website is suzannejabour.com. I'm Suzanne Jabour on all the social media with no weird characters or things after it. So if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, that's the two places I'm the most active. I actually have two contributing author books I've been part of. So I have two chapters from those books. One is in a book called 20 Shades of Grief, and that one is 20 different people's stories of their grief journey. That one really is about my journey and how that influences and really designed how I coach people. And the other one is in a book called Grit and Tenacity, and it's really aimed at women leaders and talks about how we can be in a position of leadership in this new conversation that we need to be having. Um, those are available on my website very soon. Probably by the time this is out, we're just doing a redo of all the sort of resource page and the speaker page. And the other place I would send people is to that TEDx talk, right? Grief is hard, let's do better. Or if you Google me on YouTube, you'll find all kinds of things, that being one of them. And that, interestingly, I wrote it thinking about supporters because I really saw and continue to see such a big gap in how, this shared ignorance means we don't know how to show up for each other. And what I hear from grievers is for so many of them, it's the first time someone has said, like, it's okay if you have muscle weakness and digestive problems and your brain doesn't work and you're tired and, all the various symptoms. There's about eight or nine, really every system in our body gets impacted. So it's been really a wonderful reward to have grievers say, no, like that's the first time I actually had someone say to me, indirectly say to me that what's happening to me is fine and it's normal and I shouldn't be worried about it because I'm not trying to fix anybody. Right. So those are some great resources. I'm very active on social media, so you can find endless videos of me walking my dog and talking about grief.
Well, I really love that. Well, for listeners today, I will have Suzanne's links in the show notes. When you guys get done watching this episode or listening to it, if you're on Apple, check the show notes, reach out and connect with her. As you guys have seen today, she has a very powerful story behind her loss journey that she walked. And you guys have seen how it's possible for you to walk through grief as a transformation journey and a way to have grace for yourselves. Be kind to yourselves as you walk that. Know that it's not linear. Suzanne, I also just want to say, thank you again just for your vulnerability, your honesty with us about your story today, and giving us so many tips and so much information on how we can really walk this grief journey together with kindness and compassion. And I just have to say, honestly, if it wasn't for Ben, I don't think you and I would have met, and I don't think you would
We
be
wouldn't.
doing the work you're doing in the grief space. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation.
And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Suzanne and I on today's episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share it with somebody you know who may need to hear this today. And if you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to move forward in your grief, you don't have to figure it out alone. I
Right.
offer free grief clarity calls where you can talk through what you're experiencing, help you understand what's going on beneath the surface, and find a clear path forward. You guys can book those calls at empoweredgriefjourney.com. I also want to invite you guys to explore past episodes of the podcast by going to Apple Podcasts and Podbean so you never miss a conversation. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your experience, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. You're never alone in this, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and take your grief journey one step at a time.